Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. A special welcome, of course, to Tom. I met you, Tom, I think a month ago. You texted me for an interview. I was pleasantly surprised what you had to say. And because of that interview, I thought that it was a nice idea to invite you to tell us more about the Abrahamic Revolution to us Dutch eenheid community and others who will join or see it later. Tell us something about yourself, how you come or how you become an author of Abrahamic Revolution, what your goal is, what we can attribute or share with you to reach that kind of high expectations to join the religions together.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. It's a pleasant to be here. It's a pleasure to meet the Noahide community in the Netherlands. It's a pleasure to meet you personally again. So a little bit about my personal background. I'm an Israeli, as you can hear in my accent. And I am a strategic consultant. I was the general director of a public relation company in Israel for over 25 years. I was working with many politicians. I was the spokesperson of Prime Minister Ehud Barak in 2000 and media consultant for the Minister of Defense, Amir Peretz, in 2006. I worked with many Israeli politicians, NGOs, entities, governmental agencies, and I always had a regional dimension to my work. I started in my military service in the IDF. I was in charge of the coordination between the IDF and the Palestinian police in the Jericho sector. And in 2004, I was the spokesperson of the Peres Center for Peace in the years when Shimon Peres was still alive and was and the Peres Center for Peace was the headquarters of regional cooperation between Israel and the Arab countries that were willing to cooperate. So I was taking Israeli reporters to travel in Jordan and was in charge of projects in Egypt and in the Palestinian Authority. And I always had, I was always involved in regional connections and dialogue. But after October 7th, 2023, I think that most Israelis, in nowadays, when they speak about their lives, so they have their former presentation, and then they say, but after 7th of October 2023, that changed everything, basically. We started talking. And when I say we, I speak about a network of over 100 intellectuals, politicians, imams, heads of tribes, representative of minority groups, academics, people that come from all countries of the Middle East, basically. When I say the Middle East, I use it in as a vast term. I usually refer to what's been referred to mostly as the Muslim world, speaking basically from Pakistan to Sudan, give or take. And I think that, first of all, of course, needless to say, by the fact that I myself and more Israelis are a part of this network that came to be, obviously those people are people that accept the existence of Israel. So I wouldn't claim that they represent all Muslims, or I wouldn't even say that they represent most Muslims, because I can't say where's the majority and where's the minority. That's a problem in the Middle East because there's no democracy, polls, elections. to work with as an objective criteria. But they represent communities, they represent specific political perceptions in the Muslim world or in the Arab world. Some of them, or I would say even most of them, would consider Israel as part of a solution rather than part of a problem, which is very valuable to my eyes, and something that we can work with. And when we started discussing, we understood that the region, the Middle East as a region, is not working for us. It's not a one-time thing that happened in October 7th. We don't have stability in our region. It's not even only, I know that sometimes from the West it's perceived as something that is totally focused in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's not even about that. The problems in the Middle East are wider than that. Jews are a minority in the Middle East that face challenges, but Jews are not the only minority in the Middle East that faces challenges. And other minorities such as the Yazidis, the Druze, the Kurds, the Alawites are also facing similar pattern of attacks that are basically being orchestrated by entities of what we refer to in the Middle East as political Islam, which is a term that refers to what usually is referred to in the West as the radical Islam or terrorist groups or militias, radical groups, whether those are the Muslim Brotherhood or the Iranian regime, that basically are creating destabilization because they're unwilling to accept the other right to exist as it pleases. And this is not a problem of Israel alone or of Jews alone. Most of the victims of the terrorist militias or of the armies of political Islam, whether you speak about Hamas, Hezbollah, or other groups, are not Jews. Most of the victims are Muslims. Usually the media in the Western world doesn't even don't even refer to it. But look at what happened in the Middle East in the last few years. In the civil war in Syria, over 1 million people were killed. In the civil war in Yemen, over 1 million people were killed. In the civil war in Sudan, give or take, somewhere between 500,000 to 1 million people were killed. We're not exactly sure. In the civil war that was never declared as a civil war in Iraq, at least 300,000 were killed. In the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, less than 100,000 people were killed. But the other conflicts in the Middle East are not even addressed as it comes to the global media. But we are still preoccupied with them. It's happening in our region. It's a part of our reality. So we had to understand that something fundamental is not working in this region. Obviously, there are many issues, and we can't put aside the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which is a very real conflict and a very bitter one. And every side has arguments for his good. But in the end of the day, the regional instability is wider than that, and many elements in the Middle East are asking themselves the question how to create a new Middle East. And while we started discussing those questions in Zoom meetings that happened discreetly with many representatives from many countries in the Middle East. All of them are good people. All of them are people that are seeking peace. All of them are people that have moral values and don't want to see terrorist organizations controlling their countries or their region. We started looking at Europe as a model, and we started asking ourselves questions that were outside what we knew. Because when we started really looking into things, we told ourselves, wait a minute, Europe had a similar situation. It's not the same, of course. You can't say history repeats itself, but not exactly in the same way. The regions are different, the challenges are different, but there's a lot of common ground, because if you look at history 100 years ago, Europe was fighting the same way that the Middle East is fighting today. There were many wars between the different ethnicities. You also had religious wars between Protestant and Catholic, and that's even resembles the situation in the Middle East. You had issues, for example, in Andalusia, that were very similar to what happened with Israel, with Muslim colonization and afterwards decolonization by the Spanish. And in the end of the day, you have peace today. I'm not saying that the European Union is perfect. I'm not saying that it's solving all the problems. You have new problems, okay, you have immigration, you have other issues, but you're not fighting each other. Your people, the people of Europe, I'm discluding what happened between Russia and Ukraine. They were never a part of the European Union or of the European identity. Fixed the problem. It created a situation of political stability and of nations that learned to accept each other. And it is not, I mean, if you were telling to German and French people 100 years ago that in 100 years from now they will be a part of the same entity with one flag and one coin and open borders, they would think you're delirious. And I think, first of all, many people in the Middle East think that we are delirious today when we speak about even taking inspiration from what happened in the Middle East. But when we started looking even further to what created stability in Europe, we understood that the political agreements that opened the borders, that created the confederation, basically, were only, I would say, only the egg that were laid by the chicken, that I would call the chicken a shared European identity. Because only after a European identity emerged as a very unique patent, that's indeed something very unique. It's an umbrella identity that doesn't force any people that is under the umbrella to change anything in its narrative. European identity doesn't mean that Greek should be more Swedish, or that the people of Netherlands should change their religion to Catholicism, or that the people of French should be speaking Spanish. It's inclusive, but after it's creating a bridge between narratives, and it makes people see that they're all a part of the same region that is for centuries learned to collaborate, and the people learn to respect each other, etc. Then they were open, the people were open to the idea of peace, stability, cooperation, opening the border. You couldn't say to the people of Germany, let's open the borders to the French, if they didn't learn to coexist with each other for the 20 years that basically happened between the end of the World War II and the formation of the initial political structure of the European Union or the Schengen agreements. In those years, I'm not sure how it happened, actually. It's a fascinating question. But people that were doing it deliberately, obviously, created the European identity by things like the Eurovision, for example, a singing contest, a regional singing contest. That's not obvious. Or the European Union for libraries that predated the European Union itself by 20 years, or the European Association for Museums that again happened before the European Union itself, or the European Championship in football, or I can continue to count the European projects that brought people together and under a new flag, a new identity that have a room for everyone. And that enabled a political solution that created stability. And then we thought to ourselves, how come that what Europe is suggesting for us is the totally opposite? Because basically what we came up with as an initial idea, and I think that that is the initial idea of every room that has this discussion in the Western world, is the two-state solution. That's the formula that the Western world placed on the table. Separation, each side will go to his side, like two kids in a class that can't stop fighting, okay? Each one to his side, you will have separation, and separation will create the solution. But it didn't. We had separation from Gaza. Before October 7, we had separation. They had their Hamas government. They had their borders. There were no Israeli soldiers in their borders. They had the state, even if it wasn't declared as a state. There were no settlements, no provocation, and they decided to attack because that's what radical Islam is doing. Not only to Jews, that's the same thing, that the same patterns that happens to Yazidis and Christians and Alawites in the Middle East. And if you take a look at the statistics of Christians in the Middle East in the last few decades, it tells the whole story. The Assyrians of Iraq, the indigenous people of Iraq, the original Christian community of Iraq, there are only 3 million people left of them today. 20 years ago, there were 3 million Assyrians in Iraq. Today, there are, give or take, 100,000. What happened to them? They were ethnically cleansed, but the world didn't pay attention. And we took a look at what happened with the Houthis, because the Houthis were totally separated from Jews for generations. They live 3,000 kilometers from Israel. They never saw a Jew in their life. There's not even a single Jew in Yemen or in the entire Bab el Mandab area that they could have stumble upon. That's a separation by 3,000 kilometers. That's the best. You can't imagine better separation than that. But still, they attack the Jews with the rockets, and actually the banner, the writing on their flag. I know it sounds unreal, but look it up. The banner on the flag says the curse upon all the Jews. And they didn't never met a single Jew. So separation doesn't work, never worked, won't work, and it's exactly the opposite of what created the success story of the European Union. What created the success story of the European Union wasn't separation, was teaching the people how to live together and accept each other without killing each other, using narratives. And over here, I'll say, I know that some people don't really accept it, but I would dare to say that most people are simple. Most people are not intellectuals, they're not reading the books, they're not attending Zoom meetings with authors to describe geopolitical processes, etc. Most people react to flags. If you would take a look at the fights that do happen in Europe today, except from immigration issues, those are fights between football fans. What are they fighting about? They're fighting about identity, a very primal identity. It's not about values. It's about one person that has one flag and another person that has another flag. And that's in that particular moment when their football teams are facing each other, it makes an enemy out of them. And sometimes they would beat each other and even hospitalize each other or shoot each other. It happened on this basis, okay? But take the same two football fans and now place them in a football game of the national team. A different flag. Both of them are now under the same flag. They will be hugging and cheering together. Okay? So it's not, I would say it's not the academic vision of how to change people's mind ideologically, but it works. If you take a look at reality, it really works. When people can be identified with the EU, for example, or the flag, the European flag, it creates a sense of kinship between the people. And this is something that we need in the Middle East as well. And in the Middle East, we have an advantage. Because actually, if you look at the Middle East, not as it is today, but as a potential, we all come not only from the same region. When we speak about shared identity in the Middle East, almost automatically, we're not speaking about Middle Eastern identity. We're speaking about Abrahamic identity because we share a common patriarch. We share, most of the people in the Middle East, not necessarily all of them genetically speaking, but even the other people of the Middle East that don't share the same genetic story share the same spiritual story because they accepted one of the monotheist religions and or one of its spin-offs like the Druze religion, and they accept Abraham, if not as an actual ancestor, as a spiritual ancestor. And that's a point where we can all echo together. So, first of all, this is a very exciting times. because we're not only seeing, as you discussed, geopolitical processes such as happened in Venezuela and what's going on today in Iran, and the changes in Somaliland and the Horn of Africa, and let's call it the prediction that more and more Muslim and Arab countries will be joining the Abraham Accords, but also the creation of a global Abrahamic movement, which I would say is the flagship project of what I'm doing today, together with many Abrahamic movements in Indonesia, Iraq, Egypt, Morocco, Syria, Israel, of course, and other neighboring countries. We're building something that is unprecedented. First of all, the school of thought that is to some extent a Middle Eastern school of thought, or a political current which is Middle Eastern rather than particular of one of the particular sides. An idea that can host under its umbrella Jews, Christians, moderate Muslims, religious monotheistic minorities such as the Druze or the Alawites, of course, Noahides, which are even, I would say, a natural point to it. People that believe in, that come from the same monotheistic background and want to see a Middle East that is peaceful and accept each other identities and understand that we must create an alternative to political Islam together. Because I think that a fascinating point in the politics of the Muslim world, I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but if you will take a close look, you will find out that there is a very obvious radical element. The Muslim Brotherhood, the terrorist organizations, the Iranian regime, all of those are very defined actors. They have broadcasting networks. They have, you can register, you can sign up to the Hezbollah, you can vote to the Hezbollah, you know where is the imam that speaks on their behalf. You know which charities, you know who are the influencers, like any political camp in the West or Israel or in Netherlands, it's very defined. But on the other side, who is the opposition of political Islam? There's not even a term in Arabic to define it. If something doesn't have a word, then it's in serious trouble. And it doesn't have a word. Okay, there is what's called state-sponsored Islam, which is basically the official regime, which are more moderate if you take a look at Saudi Arabia, for example. But this is not a political current. That's if I would do the equation to any European nation, for example, if I would say there's left wing, okay, there's the government, and there are other people that I'm not exactly sure. They disapprove with the left wing, for example. So that would create a serious political problem. People that has this state of mind, whether you would call it left or right, it doesn't matter, wouldn't know how to align, how to regroup, how to define themselves. They don't, the Muslim Brotherhood define themselves as Muslims. The people on the other side of this discussion who are moderate but still are Muslims. They don't want to say we're not Muslims. They don't want to say we object Muslims. They don't want to say we are against Muslim Brotherhood, because Muslim Brotherhood, it sounds good to Muslim. We're Muslims and we're brothers. So the Abrahamic movement, again, a new player in the region. We're just in the phase that we're registering the NGOs in Israel, in the United States, and gathering the leaders from the different countries in the Middle East. But it's coming to fill this space. So first of all, I'll say that my first book, The Abrahamic Revolution, which was published in English, as you see, and now is also being published in Arabic, is basically the manifesto of political Abrahamism, or the summary of those discussions that led us to a very elaborate, I would say, school of thought that gives Middle Eastern answers to Middle Eastern problems, and is basically, I would say, recovering from the intoxication of the two-state solution concept that was forced upon by the West and was never, I'm sorry to say, I can, if you want to, we can elaborate on that, but was never a tangible or realistic solution. It's not even a plan that can be, that someone with real understanding of the situation on the ground can explain how it will be manifested. But together we're starting to think otherwise. We're starting to think about a Middle East that will accept everyone and will have to get rid of the aggressors the same way that Europe had to get rid of the Nazi regime and the fascist regime with no shortcuts in the middle. But afterwards it created room for the, let's say, for the normal people to start communicating with each other. So the Abrahamic Revolution that we're now finishing the translation of the Dutch edition comes to explain how should we create this new vision, and what would be what will it look like, and how would be how will we manage the process of creating a shared Abrahamic identity, inspired by the process that created the European identity, but also very much inspired by our father Abraham and the shared legacy of Jews and Muslims. Because I would say something that might be surprising to most of you. The Quran and the Torah really resonate well together and are not in any, I would say, are not in any a substantial conflict among them. I would like to continue to speak about the third layer of what's going on, which some people, not necessarily myself, but some people refer to as the Abrahamic religion. I'm not sure I'm convenient with this term, because we're not trying to create a new religion. But on my second book, The Unity of Believers, which was co-authored with a Palestinian Christian friend, his name is Elias Nasri Baboon, we speak about a new, maybe a new and old phenomena that can be referred to as, let's call it, creating some sort of fusion between the religions. We can now see, I know that from most of the people it's a complete surprise, it is something new, but we can now see quite a few people already that would describe themselves as Abrahamic and would pray in synagogues, mosques, and churches in every place as the local tradition is, and would read the Bible, the New Convent, and the Quran as one array of books. But exactly, I wanted to say, I think that we should pause for a few questions before we delve into that, and I see that we already have a question. So if you may, Anne-Marie, I'd love to take some questions.
I have a question. The first question, I have also questions, and David also, but Jeroen, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Tom. You were talking about this Abrahamic religion. Where can we find information about this? Because I've never seen something like that. The only thing that comes close comes into mind is like the Abrahamic house in the UAE that they have now. But is it something like that, or is it something totally different that you're talking about?
Well, yes, I think it's very much different. First of all, the Abrahamic family house, it's a place. It's a place in the UAE where you have in the same complex, you have, or the same square, you have a mosque, a church, and a synagogue. And it's very much in line with what I'm speaking about, creating interfaith dialogue, not necessarily changing your faith, but accepting the other faith in your vicinity. I think it sends a message of tolerance. But when we speak about the Abrahamic religion, it's a more advanced concept. I don't think that you can really read today anywhere something substantial about it. We're dealing with this concept in my second book, The Unity of Believers, that wasn't published in English yet. It was published only in Hebrew so far. I hope that I will be able to publish it in English in the next month or 2 months or so. But I should say, I don't like. Of course, it's it's a big headline when someone says the Abrahamic religion. People start asking questions, but I think what we really refer to is not a new religion, but rather a new form of addressing interfaith dialogue, because the question is, how do you structure things in your mind? And I think it's an actual question, because most people today have the mind structure of saying, okay, there's Christianity, okay, it's a religion, right? There's Judaism, it's a religion, okay? There's Islam, it's a religion. Those are the smaller monotheistic religions, the Druze, Seba, okay? But those are the monotheistic religions, and we have Buddhism, Hinduism, etc., other religions. So every religion, that's the common perception, is standing by itself. Okay, but if you take a closer look, you will notice that inside Christianity, for example, so people say, okay, there's Christianity, but there's Catholic Christianity, and there's Protestant church, and there's evangelists, and there are different interpretations and different stories, and all those differences are about small arguments about things that usually are not really a part of the everyday life of the people and cannot really, you cannot settle those arguments. So you say, okay, all of us are, for example, Christians, one is Protestant, and we have our arguments, but today in the 21st century, we understand that those arguments are not big enough to fight on. They could be big enough to argue on, but they're not big enough to fight on, to wage war on. It happened before, but not in nowadays, okay? And take the same look on Judaism and Islam. And you would see that inside Judaism, you have Orthodox Judaism, you have reforms and conservatives that some would say they are Jews, or some would say they are not Jews. There are inside the Orthodox, there are different sects, there are different, there's Mizrahi Jews, they pray a bit different, Ashkenazi Jews, they pray a bit different. There are differences, there are different parts of Judaism, but we live in peace with the fact that we are all under the headline of Judaism, okay? And the differences are not big enough to fight on. For example, I wear a black shirt. It seems that you wear a brown shirt. We would never imagine to fight about it, right? We understand it's a difference, but it's not a difference to fight on. So if you will embrace a new perspective about the same situation without changing anyone's religion, faith, or identity, you can just change terminology. And then you would say, instead of saying the monotheistic religions or Abrahamic religions, you would say Abrahamic religion. And under the Abrahamic religion, you would have Christianity, Islam, and Judaism in the same way that we describe today Protestants, evangelists, etc., under the term Christianity. And the terminology is creating unity. Okay? I'm not suggesting that someone should change his belief, his faith, his way of worship. No, I'm suggesting that the same way that we all understand that even if I wear a black shirt and you wear a white shirt, we all wear clothes, and it's not, the color of our clothes is not a big enough issue to fight on. We all worship the same God. We all agree that this is the God that came to Abraham. That's a lot to work with. That's a lot of common ground. We all agree on a lot. The story of the prophets, whether it's King David or many other figures, are repeating itself in the holy books. How was the world created? All those different religions, quote unquote, are in agreement on all those basic terms. What's considered to be moral? You shall not kill, you shall not steal. There's an agreement on all the important things. So we're basically suggesting not to change anything that is important, but rather change the perspective. I hope it answered your question.
Yes, but I have follow-up questions. So I am interested to know, is this like a syncretic religion, or is it more like a spiritual, intellectual movement? And I also want to know, like, it's being founded by someone, individuals who are connected to each other, or just a spontaneous movement, or how do I see it? Is there an example of a person that we can look up and see how they practice it, or how they organize this religion? Because I'm interested to learn about it.
Yes. So, okay. So in terms of movement, we are building an Abrahamic movement. We're not building a religion. It's not about creating a new religion. It's about creating a movement. You can call it public, you can call it political, you can call it public diplomacy, you can call it intellectual movement, call it what you will. But we, first of all, we see that the Abrahamic perspective is something that is emerging. It's happening. I can tell you as someone that is, I think, sorry if it sounds unhumble, but I think the first researcher in the world that is actually studying this phenomena. The Abrahamic movements are happening. They're happening in the Middle East. No one is doing it. It's just happening. I'm approached on a daily basis by politicians, intellectuals, thought leaders from Iraq, from Sudan, from Somalia, from Iran, from Pakistan. They look at those ideas as a good framework to create solution. I think I didn't even have the time to update on Marie. It's very new. I was selected as one of the Men of the Year for 2025 by the newspaper El Hadith Al Arabi, which is an Arabic newspaper. I'm an Israeli. I shouldn't been elected as one of the Men of the Year of an Arabic-speaking newspaper. It doesn't make any sense. But it happened. It happened because those ideas have a lot to offer to people in the Middle East. And many people in the Middle East were waiting for something like that. So again, I hope that this time I answered your question. But I
Yes,
should
you
say,
did.
I can't, the standards of what we're dealing with here is very different than the standards of media phenomena in the Middle East. I'm sure I can send you a few videos that someone took of, for example, a rabbi and a sheikh praying together in the same synagogue while the rabbi is standing and the sheikh is bowing and they're praying together. And I can send you some videos that I myself took when I took a sheikh to the Western Wall in Jerusalem and he was praying with the rabbi next to the Western Wall. But those are only glimpses of those people don't live their lives online like modern day influencers, and actually they are, to some extent, they are quite in danger. So it's I would say semi underground. But definitely, first of all, I can say that I know personally a few people that are praying as Jews in synagogues, as Christian in churches, as Muslims in mosques, and read all the free scriptures as one array of books. And I think that this tendency, this trend, if you want to call it like that, has a lot of sense into it. If you really start looking, you can see that there are point of interests and echo between the three books and between the three faiths that have the same origin, basically. Everything comes from the Torah. Quran accept the Torah, and the New Convent accept the Torah. So it has the same origin. But I think that in the next few years or so, this is also something that we're working on, and I actually had the initial pleasure of discussing it with Anne-Marie, the creation of an Abrahamic library or some sort of project that will bring the books of these new perceptions, not only for the audiences in the Middle East, but also for the audiences in Europe. And I hope that next time we'll meet, I will be able to give you better answers.
All right, thank you, Tom. Maybe now it's time for Sarah or David. Which one of you will ask a question?
Well, I wrote down some questions, and because I wrote down so many, I think I have 3 questions that have to do with the political situation in the Arab slash Muslim world, and the other is more about the Israel-Palestinian conflict and the things happening here in Europe and how people deal with the situation over there and how they think about it. So I think let's start with the small things, and there are 3 questions that are connected.
With your permission,
Yeah.
one, okay? If you don't mind.
Okay, oh, it's okay. I have to pick one. Yeah, how to deal with the world, also in Europe, which I hear more and more that they are talking about this two-state solution. Is this even possible? And what's your thought about it?
Okay, so basically your question is about the two-state solution, if I understand correctly.
Yeah.
Okay. So here are a few things about the two-state solution that are not discussed usually. First of all, again, the idea by itself of creating separation, if it's the first time that someone attempts this idea, I would say, okay, it makes sense. We want to his corner, and that's it. We've done with that. We had October 7th, we saw what happened. Separation is not working. Part of what's happening with the radical Islam is that it makes people go and travel miles and miles from their houses and blow themselves up on foreign lands, on minorities that never done anything bad to them because they're not Muslims. So we have to adjust our thinking to that. The first fact that I think that the West is, and even most Israelis, are totally unaware of, and it creates a really funny discussion, is that the people that are referred to as Palestinians and supposedly supposed to be the Palestinian state under the two-state solution, okay? So I guess the more educated of you are aware to the fact that it's supposed to be 2 different territories, right? Gaza and the West Bank. And both of these territories supposed to be somehow, magically, a part of the same state that will be connected through Israel somehow, while it's obvious that Israel can't have, it's not even logical to accept of Israel to have like free movement of Palestinians from the West Bank to Gaza or vice versa through Israeli territories when we don't have securities today. And the more important fact that I'm sure that some of you may not even believe me, and I think I'll have very hard time to prove it. But those people generally don't consider themselves to be a part of the same people. Okay? The people of Gaza, first of all, they call themselves Gazans, Gazawi. Okay, they were originally from Egypt. They speak Egyptian dialogue. Their family names, they come from Egyptian clans. They came from Egyptian culture. Okay, Their religious, of course, the religion is Islam, but the religious, I would say, ceremonies and behavior and traditions are Egyptians, and in the last decades were very much influenced by Iran, something that bothering the entire Arab world, by the way. The people of the West Bank, if you ask them, don't ask me, most of them will tell you, we don't want to be in the same state with Gaza. We were never together. Think about it. I mean, why did it ever make sense? The people from the West Bank were part of Jordan. They speak Jordanian dialect. They have Jordanian passports. Their families are Jordanians. Their traditions are Jordanians. The way they, the way they do the religious ceremonies, etc., is resembling the Jordanian way, okay? And they're very much threatened by the Gazan way, which considered to be more militant, more extremist in terms of Islam, more primitive, because they usually in the West Bank, the Palestinians, they're being married in the ages of, let's say, between 18 to 21, and in Gaza they start marrying girls when they're 13 or 14. And the Palestinians in the West Bank, they don't want to be a part of the Palestinian state together with Gazans, and to have Gazans voting to their parliament and creating, they will be the majority, the Gazans, and their ways are again more extreme in terms of religion than of the West Bank. The West Bank people are quite liberal. They have another way of life. And if you ask the Gazans, they'll tell you, we don't want to be with the people from the West Bank because we were already with them. Okay, that's how it started. And they were condescending, they were oppressing us. The Palestinian Authority was headquartered in Ramallah. So the people of the West Bank, who again don't consider the Gazans their brothers, they were never related in any way, shape, or form. They maintain most of the budgets to the West Bank, and all of the ministers were from the West Bank. And in Gaza, they nominated deputy ministers, and they gave the 20% cut of the budget to Gaza. So it's only a Western concept that all of those people are Palestinians and should somehow be together. Now, if you think of it fully, it's really rather amazing because, in the same war, Israel occupied the West Bank from Jordan, Gaza from Egypt, and Golan Heights from Syria. But from some reason, no one say, okay, the two-state solution will also be with the Golan Heights joining Gaza and the West Bank. Because it's obvious it's not making any sense. But why is it making any sense to join together Gaza and the West Bank? It doesn't make any sense to them. It's only a Western idea. Okay? Of course, I'm not suggesting all Palestinians would agree with what I said, but I'm describing definitely something that quite a huge public in both in both sides, whether it's the Gazan side or the West Bank side, would say, no, I don't want to be with them. So even if the West would have spoken of a three-state solution, or Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza, you could say it makes some sort of sense. But the idea behind the two-state solution is really unclear. And even if you could solve those issues, bear in mind, and here's where it gets really problematic, I would say. Because if you would think about those ideas until the end, you will have no alternative but to recognize that the people that are leading the West are really not serious people. They're promoting plans that are easy to sell to people, but it's not realistic at all, okay? Because let's do a deal, okay? Let's be a team now, okay? I will say what are the basics of the two-state solution according to the European Union policy, okay? And you will correct me if I'm wrong in anything, right? Do we have a deal? Okay, just interrupt if I'm doing any mistake, right? So it says ceasefire, right? Ceasefire in Gaza. That one we figured out, okay? Israel won't continue to fight Hamas, okay? And now Hamas won't govern the territory. Someone else will govern the territory, and that will pave the way to a two-state solution where the Gaza and the West Bank will be somehow connected in a miraculous way, or with a bridge, or I'm not exactly sure what's the plan, because, you know, if you want to build a bridge or a tunnel or whatever, it will take some time, right? It's not, you can declare independence and then start building a bridge that will take 10 years to manifest this independence. But anyway, I'm going back to the situation over here. So it says, now Israel will stop fighting Hamas. They will step down. The Palestinian Authority will step in. Israel will evacuate the settlements, right, from the West Bank, because the settlements are supposedly the problem. And then we will have a two-state solution where we will eventually have the reality that is a Palestinian state, and that will create peace, okay? So first of all, the first question, and I think this is the most brutal question. Let's say we'll go with those thoughts, okay? So we have a ceasefire, and Israel accepted the ceasefire eventually. And there will be no continuation of the war against Hamas, okay? But Hamas is saying, and they're not saying anything else, they're saying, we won't step down. We won't hand down our weapons. We won't, okay? Make us. So what's the plan? I mean, is this even a plan of adults? It's a plan for people who never understood the situation on the ground, because there's no miracles over here. If Hamas is holding the ground and has its weapons and is ready to fight, and you want a ceasefire, but you also want a Palestinian state with the Palestinian Authority inside, that's exactly like saying, I want an omelet without breaking the eggs. It's just undoable. There's no scenario for this to happen. It's not rocket science. They are not standing down of the weapons. Someone will have to fight them, or we will have the same situation. And in the same situation, Hamas is governing Gaza, and the Palestinian Authority is governing their parts of the West Bank, and those two forces are fighting each other. And if the Palestinian Authority is trying to go inside Gaza in this situation today, so they will be eradicated. They will just be shot by Hamas personnel. And we haven't made any progress. We just, some people would died. What have we achieved? Okay, so it's not a plan. A plan makes sense. This is fairy tale. This is something that is easy to sell to the people of the West that doesn't understand the situation on the ground and frankly don't care. This is the same mindset of the school teacher that says, I had enough. I don't want to hear anything about those two kids who are fighting anymore. Separate and I'll have quiet. On the real life, it may create temporary quiet. Temporary, because we see that's exactly what happened in Gaza. Again, we had separation, no settlements, no IDF inside. They could choose to live their lives, but they chose jihad against the infidels, which are not infidels, but it's another conversation.
I totally agree on you. My question was also not from what my perspective is. Already when Gaza got their freedom and they had elections, the first thing they did from Hamas was going after all the Palestinian Authority members and get them out of the way. So we all know how what happened then. So I totally agree on you. So also the two-state solution, that even a three-state solution you should then have, because as you said, the Egyptians or the Gazans are mostly from Egyptian background, and the West Bank Palestinians mostly come from Jordan backgrounds. So you made it very clear. So it's a very good explanation, even with details that I didn't know. And to make it a little bit bigger, if you're talking about the whole Muslim or Arab world, we all know that there was one time this thing called the Arab Spring. We called it Arabische Lente. But do you see a way to bring democracy and separation, sort of, between religion and state as we know it in Europe? Do you know any way to bring that to the Arab Muslim world and to make that better? And what happened to this Arab Spring? So that's my last question. Then Judith is.
So first of all, yes, but I do think it's a process, and I think that in many terms, Islam, I hope so, and I actually believe so, is on the verge of its golden age. We can see the beginning of the change, mainly in Saudi Arabia, but not only. As someone who is looking from very close about these topics, I can see that the future will be better. The future, the far future is promising. We can see many new beginnings. The Islam needs a renaissance. They know it. They're in their dark ages. The leaders, they're aware of it. They're trying to pull out of it. To the same way, I would say that Christianity pulled out of the era of the Crusaders and the Inquisition and basically all the horrendous acts that happened in the name of God. And I think that Islam has the same situation today. There's a lot of resemblance, if you wish, between the Basij, or what's been referred to in Iran as the revolutionary guards or the modesty guards, and the Spanish Inquisition. There's a lot of resemblance. So first of all, if we'll be fair, and we should be fair, I think that we should say that to some extent, the Western take that says, democracy and Islam doesn't align is not accurate. First of all, because we see active democracies. You can say, of course, there are disputes, but there's also disputes about the American democracy. But we can see active democracies in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Somaliland. That's an actual Muslim democratic country with a very interesting model. In Rojava, which is basically the Kurdish autonomy in Syria, that is also Muslim. And in Turkey as well, even if we don't like the outcomes of this democracy sometimes, but it's definitely a functioning democracy with a challenge today, but a democracy. And there's also democratic lives in Egypt and in Iraq, not in the same way that are in the West, in a more limited way, I would say, but it's something. Okay, we shouldn't dismiss it as nothing. If Somaliland exists and Rojava exists as two kind of different models, but two very interesting models of democracy that was adapted to tribal society, to a traditional society, to Islamic society, but still a democracy, the same way that our democracy is adapted, the Israeli democracy is adapted to Judaism. That's okay. It's a democracy. It's a healthy thing. And we can see that even in places that you can't consider democracies, there are, maybe you can say that this is an intermediate phase, but they have a good intermediate phase. If you take a look at the UAE, for example, if you take a look at Morocco, for example, if you take a look at Saudi Arabia as an example, and even if Kuwait as an example, all of those places, they are not democracies. You can't call it democracy, not by any chance. But there's security, there's stability, there's prosperity, the people are happy, there's to some extent, there's personal freedom, not in Saudi Arabia, not all the way, but in most of the places there's personal freedom. And there's no political rights in the like in the West. Okay, call it work in progress, call it a situation that is relatively can be described as successful if you if you compare it to the neighborhood. And I think that what we will be witnessing for, that's a kind of it's not being a fortune teller, it's predicting the geopolitical changes, because what happened, it's very, I know we have a few more questions, and I personally, I make the time to answer all the questions. I'm not sure how are you with time, Marie, but I think it's interesting to say over here.
There's time enough, take your time, and these questions are very important, so I'm glad you take the time for this.
Sure, it's a pleasure. So what happened in the UAE? I think it's a very good example. So first of all, we're speaking about a very tiny nation. Emiratis are 300,000 people. Most of the residents of the Dubai, etc., are not Emiratis. But they had their distinct approach, and they decided to go to alliance, okay? And real alliance, not just an agreement, an alliance. There's a difference between agreements and alliances. And you can see that it created a real new circle, because first of all came dialogue. Okay, of course, you couldn't reach a political agreement without dialogue. So people were sitting in back rooms and making room for agreements, okay? And then it followed with a political agreement. But then the regime, the Emir in the UAE, he had, and it's a part of the natural process over here, he had to take care of the religious issue. Because what would happen if the imams in the mosques in the UAE would criticize the agreement, would say, religiously speaking, you shouldn't sign this agreement, releasing fatwas against the agreement. It would create a situation that would destabilize the regime. Okay, so first thing they did, and surely they started this process many months before they signed the code itself. They started working on their religious clergy. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with those issues, but I'm very much familiar, and I've seen it in my own eyes. Imams that started speaking in the sermons things that the regime didn't like, save Gaza, the jihad, all this terminology, were taken by the police while they were speaking. And they didn't wait for them to finish the sermon. The police came into the mosque and arrested them while they were giving the du'as, while they were giving the sermon, and took them out, and no one ever seen them again. Okay? So that basically created a situation. Now, I must say that this situation is embedded. I'm not sure if any of you ever read Quran or studied a bit, but if you learn to know Quran, you would understand that there are two ways of interpreting it. One, which is, I'm allowing myself to say, the forceful way, where it can be easily contradicted from within Quran itself, is the same way that ISIS and the Muslim Brotherhood, etc., are interpreting Quran. One, so one God, it means one religion, which means that everyone should pray the same, to be Muslims in terms of believing in the Quran, praying in the Islamic way, or you should die. That's the two options. But actually, Quran itself, if you really read Quran, it's embracing Judaism, it's embracing Christianity as well. It's not coming to replace Judaism or Christianity, and it's not coming to contradict them. And Quran accepts the holiness of the Torah, and Quran also accepts the promise of Allah or Hashem or God to the sons of Israel on the promised land. Quran repeats it. Quran even says, unlike other scriptures, that once the Israelites are going back to their country, God forbids them from turning back. Enter the promised land I have prescribed to you, and you shall not turn back. That's Allah's words to the Jews in the Quran. Okay, so I hope it answered your question. Okay.
Yes, a little bit surprisingly even that you also gave examples of good examples of that democracy is well, gaining its conquering ground on the.
I'll add a few sentences on that. Okay, democracy is a very important value. Okay, and this conversation happens between people that come from democratical state and democratical values and democratical traditions. But on the other side of the table, my friends, okay, my friends who share our values, okay, this is something that I have to stress out, in the Muslim world, okay, they again share our values. I stress it. They're intimidated by democracy, not because they're intimidated by freedom or by democracy itself, because they see their societies and they see that democracy will lead to basically to a democratic Sharia law, because the Islam, those organizations, the Muslim Brotherhood, the political forces of Islam, first of all, the radicals in Islam are not a small group. I'm not saying that they're the majority, but they're definitely not a small group. And they're the best organized group. So you were referring before to what happened in Gaza after the elections in Gaza. So I want to tell a story that people usually don't know, but I think it's very important to understand, because that's exactly the reason why my friends in the Muslim world were supposed to say, yes, give us democracy. But they say, no. We don't want democracy. We want a strong king. A strong king like the king of Saudi Arabia, like the king of Morocco, who has the force to stop radical Islam, because that's reality. Okay, where you have in the Arab world, where you have strong kings or emirs, it doesn't matter, they are stopping radical Islam. They're keeping things under a certain volume. They have the ability to act outside democracy. And what happened in Gaza, which is a fascinating story, was that the elections in Gaza, the elections that you refer to, that was the only elections in Gaza, basically, they were regional and personal elections. It's a technical thing, but it's very important, because what happened was, from the, let's call it, from the secular, moderate, liberal forces, or relatively liberal forces in Gaza Strip. People like, for example, Muhammad Dakhla. You can like him, you cannot like him, but he's definitely a better alternative than Hamas. They, in every region, there were few candidates that were representing the same party and basically were fighting each other in the same district. Okay? Now, in the other side, when it came to Hamas, they had religious leadership. And the religious leadership, the sheikhs, they told the candidates, no, you can't run, you will be the only one that will run, you will support him, and you will support him, and that's it. And that's the decision of the sheikh. And that's what happened. So in every region, Hamas had one candidate, and the opposing forces had 4 or 5 candidates. And if you would actually count the votes, Hamas lost those elections. If you would count the votes. But because of their ability to consolidate the efforts and the other side lack of ability to create something that is parallel to a religious leader that's saying to someone, no, you can't run, their system collapsed, and it was the first elections and the last elections. And people from neighboring countries in the Middle East are looking at what happened over there, and they say, yeah, that's what will happen in our societies as well. We will have elections. The radical movements will manipulate those elections. And then afterwards, the Western world will say, oh, now they're elected. So, and we will be screwed, sorry for my French. So they, again, not all of them, but people who share our values and would very much like to live in a functioning democracy. In some places in our world, they would say, no, we're not ready for that. We need maybe a decade, maybe 2 decades, maybe a century of having a strong king, a protector, someone that will stabilize, that will have the mandate to do what happened in Saudi Arabia and in the Emirates, and then maybe we can switch to democracy.
It makes sense, Tom, such thought. To establish a king in such circumstances, but how is it possible to influence the political Islam in a way that it has potency?
Okay, so I'll give first of all, I think it's a great question. I think that what happened until now, first of all, no one really tried to combat radical Islam. I think that if you will take a very sincere look at what's going on in the West, specifically in Europe, the regimes, the politicians, the political systems in the European countries were basically didn't understood the nature and the danger of political Islam and how it can actually affect what's going on in their countries until it became too late. And if you are today, for example, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands or of France or the UK or any other country in Europe for that matter, and you think about the option of, for example, I don't know, siding with Israel on a specific matter, or doing something against Muslim immigration, or countering Muslim Brotherhood groups, you have to take into consideration that you will be personally intimidated and you might be assassinated, and your streets will be flooded by groups, as we've seen in the Free Palestine demonstrations, that of course, many of those people, many of the demonstrators were good people that saw very hard images in television and came to demonstrate against killing children, etc. And I understand it and respect it. But you were in the demonstrations. They were not, you cannot say that they were all the people in the demonstrations. Some of the entities behind those demonstrations are definitely factors and players and organizations that are coming to destabilize the regimes in Europe, that are coming to force Sharia laws, that are coming to create organized violence and threat of organized violence. And if I was a European politician, that was something that I should have taken in extreme cautious. I think this is why we see that the plan that the West is marketing, as we explained before, is completely detached from reality. But it's not creating friction with the Islamic world if this is the plan that they're promoting. So they feel safe with it.
Thank you. But no, first of all, I will give the floor to Judith. Judith is waiting for a long, long time. Thank you, Judith, for waiting. First, go ahead.
No problem. It was very interesting. But my comments is about the first part, because you were talking about finding a common identity. That's about finding similarities. Before I became or knew I was a Noahide, I studied all the religions, and I came to the conclusion that you can put it all down in one word, and that's respect. And after I found the Noahide laws, I think maybe they are the Abrahamic laws, the oldest religion where it all started. So that's the common ground we can build on. And I also think, I don't know how it is in the Middle East, but all around the world, a lot of constitutions have a lot of the Noahide laws within their law books already. So that's the place I think we should build on. And I'm very happy to see that now I find it here, but also on other YouTube channels, you see the same movement or ideas about finding our similarities, because that's the moral construct and that's the base on which we have to go on and build on. But how, and not with all the different names and different people who you really have to get it all together. And I don't know how, but maybe you have ideas on how to get the different Noahide groups and all the other groups who are willing to find the similarities and leave the details of the religion to the religion, but the morals should be, I think, the 7 Noahide laws. And I don't think many people will object to that, because I think most people already live by those laws because they have their morals. And I find it, it's sad that it is so hard to accomplish.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So first of all, let's start with yes, because I think that when you speak about the 7 Noahide laws, that's part of what I refer to as the common ground, because that's something that, well, basically we all agree on, and not only that we all agree on, it's creating structure, because there's the term of interfaith dialogue that basically many people describe the things that I do as well as part of being interfaith dialogue. But the way I look at it, it's something more than that, or at least the way I'm handling it. Because the dialogue is nice. People are coming, they speak, they share opinions, they drink coffee together, and most of the times they don't beat each other. It's great, okay? But I think that we can start speaking in terms of interfaith agreements, okay? Because and this is something I refer to in my book, and I know that it's causing a lot of let's call it, it's definitely not in consensus. And I'm not, as you can see, I'm not a rabbi, I'm not a religious scholar. I can't say that I'm an academic that learned all the religions in depth. I'm an autodidact. I've done my studies from my perspective, and I can be easily labeled as wrong. Sorry. After said that, so we look at the point of major disagreements between the religions, okay? And there's also, for example, there's a point of disagreement between Judaism and Islam on the question whether it was Isaac or Ismail that were taken to the mountain. Okay, it's a discussion. We can speak about it, but it's not really something that is creating. It's nothing to fight over, right? It's a disagreement. They have their story, we have our story. You can argue about it, but it doesn't really matter. But if you go to the things that do matter, okay? So first of all, question number one, where should the Jews be? It's a good question. So I would say, I read all the scriptures and they all say that Jews should be in Israel. It's very clear. Quran says Jews should be in Israel. It's written in the Quran. It's written in the Torah. It's very clear. Okay. The other question is who should be sovereign in Israel? Again, very clear. Jews. Torah, Quran. Read from here to there. It's very clear. Okay. What's good and what's bad? Over there, we speak about the 7 rules of Noahide. Okay, for sure, Jews have more rules, we know about that, but we understand that it is something specifically for the Jews as a nation with a stronger connection to God, etc. And the real moral rules are the 7 Noahide rules. That's okay if you apply those rules. So you're a good person. And now comes the radical question. First of all, whether Muhammad was a prophet. It's a radical question. It's a question of great disagreement, okay? And it's a question that creates, again, you may disagree with me, but it creates a lot of bloodshed. It creates, the conflict over here is unnecessary because he is what it is. I can describe him in this word, in that word. It's not a matter that we should be fighting on. He is what it is. They want to call him a prophet, they can do that. But I suggest that we can all align on new lines. Why do I suggest it? First of all, because if you would look at the original definition of what is a Noahide or Ger Toshav, okay, you will find out that Muslims fall to those categories naturally, without any distress. They just it described Muslims basically. Okay, those definitions, of course, were written before Islam, obviously, but Muslims tend to those definitions to the letter. There's not even the problem that happens with Christians regarding JC and his status, for example, for instance. And I should say, and I actually said it, and it created a lot of reaction in the Muslim world because I said it in Lebanese television, that because in realistic life, part of the prophecies of Muhammad in the Quran is the establishment of the state of Israel and the return of the Jews for their homes. If we want to create proactive approach and to create bridges, we can accept him as a prophet, not to us, but to the Muslims. His prophecy did came to be. You can say, and you will be right if you say it, it's not his original prophecy, it was prophesied before him, okay? But those are arguments if you like to argue. If you don't like to argue and you like to get to accordance and you like to respect the other side, as you said, it's about respect. I really appreciate you saying it because I also have the same person. Of course, it's about morality as well, but it's about respect. So why not respecting everyone? Because Jews can say, and I used to work with Rabbi Sharkey, we had discussions about those topics. Those are topics that Judaism should resolve inside Judaism. But I support in Judaism to say that we can recognize Muhammad's prophecy as a prophet for the Muslims. He was sent to tell the Muslims that the Torah is holy. That's a part of his prophecy. We can accept it. We can acknowledge that. We don't have to say that he's our prophet. He's not our prophet. But the same way that I don't really have to apologize if I done something wrong, but I can accept that you were offended and it created a bridge of understanding between us. The same way we can say, okay, Muhammad is your prophet and we accept that he's your prophet. And we can say, okay, Muslims are Noahites. And if they maintain the Noahide rules, then they have the place at the table like Noahides. And the Muslims on their behalf should, basically they shouldn't do everything because it's already written in the Quran, but it's written in the parts of the Quran that they're not teaching in the schools or in the mosques or in the madrasas. Because Quran says, towards the end of the days, I will bring you back to the Holy Land that I prescribed to you. It says it to the people of Israel. Okay? So a real Muslim that wasn't caught in false interpretation, who shouldn't object the formation of Israel, he should rather see it as the fulfillment of the prophecy, as the fulfillment of Allah's objection, of Allah's commitment to the people of Israel in the Quran. And actually, if we had better communication in the Middle East to begin with, you know what, I'll tell a story. Okay, I know that we're already long, but I think it's a very important story. So some of you may know that when Israel was founded in 1938, before Jews arrived, or most of the Jews arrived, there were actually two Muslim populations in Israel. The Arab Muslim population, who was the vast majority, 99%, but also the Circassian or the Cherkess Muslim population, which is a distinct ethnic group, but they're Muslims. They're not Arabs, they have their own language, but they're Muslims. And when Jews start coming from Israel, they had a lot of trouble with the Arab Muslim residents. That's part of the known history. But a little known history is what happened between the Jews and the Circassian Muslims in Israel, because that's actually a fascinating story that I heard from a Circassian friend. So he says that their elders are speaking about when they first heard that strange people came across the valley and started building a new village or whatever. So they send their horsemen, they are a warring nation. They send their fighters to see who are those people, what do they want, what's going on. And the amazing thing is that Circassians, they come from southern Russia. So their language has a lot of Russian into it. It really resembles Russian. And the Jews that came to Israel in that time they came from Russia and they were speaking Russians. So the Circassians came and they asked the Jews, who are you? And they asked them in Russian, and the Jews knew Russian. So they told them, oh, we're the Jews. And the Circassians started crying, and they fell on their knees, and they said, the prophecy is upon us. That's our prophecy from the Quran, that you will come back. And they hugged the Jews. And ever since then, we still have an alliance in Israel between Circassians, who are again Muslims, and Jews. And Circassians go to the IDF and serve in the military and are a total part of the Israeli society. And they're Muslims, but they had better communication to understand. Maybe it's only about language, maybe in a different past, if the language wasn't a barrier, maybe also the Arabs would understand that this is a part of the prophecy, and they were rejoicing and proud that the Jews are coming back as was foreseen in the Quran, and not taking it as something that is negative.
May I ask a question about it? Is there an interpretation issue with the definition of the Jews and what the Quran see as who are the Jews are? Because I talked with a colleague and she said, yes, it says in the Quran that the people of the Jews will return, but that are the religious Jews, not the Jews, not a secular state. We refuse that. So is there how do you see that? There is a gap between secular and religious, of course.
I'll explain that gap. So first of all, Quran is interesting in the sense, first of all, in Quran, there are two parts. You can divide it into two parts. The parts that happened in Mecca, where Muhammad was in Mecca, that's the early parts, and the parts that happened in Medina, after he exited Mecca. And you can see that in the parts that happened in Mecca, the Jews are referred to as Banu Israel. Bnei Israel, sons of Israel, or the Israelites. In Arabic, Banu Israel, that's how they refer to in the Quran. And the image of Banu Israel in the Quran is a very respectable image. Banu Israel, very similar to what's going on in the new convent, in the good parts. Banu Israel are the chosen people. They're celebrated. They're loyal to God. God is giving them special instructions, etc., etc. On later parts of the Quran starts referring obviously to the same people as Yahud. No longer Banu Israel, the sons of Israel, now the Jews. Now, obviously, it's needless to say, every person that knows history knows that it's the same thing. The sons of Israel and the Jews, well, especially if you speak about those eras that are after Moses brought the Torah, it's the same thing, basically. You can argue that this one was converted, but it's the same thing. unfortunately, inside the walls of, I would say, Islamic propaganda, there were arguments that were being built under the premises that the other side is not a part of the discussion. Because when the other side is not a part of the discussion and is not arguing with you, it's very easy to, to say whatever you want, even if it doesn't make sense. Because, okay, I know this interpretation that you were referring to. It's a very popular interpretation in the Muslim world. So it says, no, the Jews are respectable only if they're religious. So first of all, this exact verse, okay, where Quran says that God will bring the sons of Israel, Banu Israel, not the Jews over here. It says, I will bring back Banu Israel towards the end of the days to their country. Okay, so this interpretation is not even valid by the word itself because it says Banu Israel. But I think that if you will look at logic over here, okay, so let's say that you are a Muslim and you read the Quran and there's a prophecy that says towards the end of day I will gather Banu Israel to their promised land. Now, the most common argument against it in Islam today would say Banu Israel are no longer, they're not around anymore. There was a tribe, it was a Muslim tribe, okay, Banu Israel. We can refer to that, people will be very confused, but we can explain why it can be considered as a Muslim tribe in specific interpretations of Islam. But there was a tribe, this tribe was lost, we don't know, like other nations that were lost in time, okay? And the Jews are people that have a different religion, they're not the same people. There are even stories that are completely made up that say that there was a tribe that took over the Jewish identity of imposters. It doesn't even make sense, but that's the story. Now, if you will go along this lane, okay, and you would say, no, the Banu Israel, they don't exist anymore. So how can the prophecy be fulfilled? If there's no longer Banu Israel, how can God bring them to their country towards the end of days? So basically, if you're a Muslim and you want at least to make sense, you can't argue that because that would say that the prophecy is false. And the only way that makes sense to interpret this prophecy is that the people that call themselves Banu Israel or the Jews, which is the same thing, and now say we are the descendants of all those people that are mentioned in your Quran as the Moses and all those people that you know that were the ancestors of Banu Israel, okay? They are the ones that are returning. Or the other way you can say is that the prophecy was false and those people are no longer and can be brought back. But then, how would you base yourself on Quran if the prophecy is false? It's a prophecy from the Quran.
Oh, I understand. Yes. So basically, the prophecy came to life. So that is the proof of the existence that Bnei Israel are the Jews.
Well, what's the alternative? If there's no more, if they perished, if there was like a tribe that, as Muslims said, the Banu Israel were massacred by the Khazarians in the 11th century. That's the most common story that they tell. This story, by the way, doesn't make any sense because it will suggest basically that one tribe assassinated another tribe and then learned its language and then continue his bloodline. So every kid took the identity of another kid with his ancestry, and they asked their ancestry after they were already dead and learned their language from them after they killed them. It doesn't make any sense. It never happened. It can never happen. There was never a situation where one people said, oh no, wait a second, we don't like our language anymore, we don't like our identity anymore, now let's this tribe identity and kill this tribe. It doesn't make any sense. But that's the story that they're telling. Again, when the other side is not represented in the conversation, it's very easy to say whatever you want.
Perfect. It's a clear answer. I want to go to Jeroen. Jeroen, you have a question.
Yes, my question is the following. Like you've talked about this new Abrahamic movement, but this is not the first of its kind. In the past, there have been like other similar movements. I'm not saying they are exactly the same, but like pan-Semitism that was there, and other movements that have now revived, like Semitic Action of the Vision movement. I was wondering if you think these movements have failed, or what is your opinion on them, or do you have a favorable opinion on them? Because I think there are a lot of predecessors to what you are describing in the Abrahamic movement.
For example?
The moves I listed, like the pan-Semitism, and now the Semitic Action and the Vision movement. I don't know if you have heard about them.
So first of all, no. And I think it's a good response. We're dealing with an area, not only an area that is being threatened by the Muslim Brotherhood. I'm saying the Muslim Brotherhood is, let's call it as a way to conclude names of many entities that most of them align with the Muslim Brotherhood. I didn't heard any of the terms that you mentioned ever being manifested as an alternative to those ideas or gathering an amount of people to create any project. But again, it's very possible that I'm just not knowledgeable in those specific movements that you're mentioning. I'm guessing that those are European movements.
No, one is, I think, under Nocha is very famous. The Vision movement is by Rabbi Yehuda HaKohen, and he is, I'm not sure, but I think he lives in the West Bank, if I'm not mistaken. Other people might know him better. And he has this ideology that's basically based upon Abraham Stern, but it's very hard to understand for me because it has a lot of complexities and nuances that I'm not very familiar with, and it's this kind of syncretic movement. But what is mentioned in this kind of movements is the Jewish liberation and the Semitic liberation of all Semitic people. So it's not an exclusionary movement, and it has an overlap with what you are describing.
Jeroen, sorry, just to interrupt you. Are you talking about the son-in-law of Rabbi Chaim Goldberg? Rabbi Yehuda HaKohen?
Yeah, but I don't know the family relation, so I'm not sure. But I think we're talking about the same person.
Yeah,
and that's why he's known in our circles.
Yeah, he's teaching Orot Milchama, the laws of war from Rabbi Cook.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, he's the
Yes, he
son-in-law
also-
of Rabbi Chaim Goldberg.
Yes, and he is, I think, head of this movement.
It's
But-
not a movement, it's a magazine, I think.
Yes, but the magazine is based on movement. If you look up Vision Movement on Google, you find the Wikipedia page for it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not very well known. I see also in Nochheit circles, it's probably not super well known, but it's based upon like I don't know, Hebrew Universalist movement. It's for me still hard to describe because I'm still learning about it.
Okay, so first of all, I probably know about it less than you do. But second of all, to my very limited understanding, you're describing a Jewish movement that is operating in the sphere of Jewish revival, Jewish vision, etc. When I speak,
Yes.
okay, so basically it means that if I'm a Muslim or if I'm a Christian, I won't be a member of this movement. Maybe they will accept me if I try, but I won't try because I don't think it's my place. It's a Jewish movement. That's the identity of the movement. It's a thought current inside the Jewish framework. Okay? And what we're creating is an Abrahamic movement that represent Abrahamic perspective that Jews can be members in, Muslims can be members in, Christians can be members in, Druze can be members in, and everyone who aligned, first of all, with the Abrahamic values and with the perspective that we start from common ground and we start from being a family, and we do have problems, but we should discuss those problems as family that shares believe in one God, values, etc., rather than like two nations that are completely alien to each other and trying to destroy each other. Okay? And if you accept the framework or the principle that says that the Middle East deserves to have freedom from terror and militias the same way that Europe has, and that it doesn't matter which religion we're coming from, we don't approve killing in the name of religion, full stop, we just don't approve of it, then you can be a part of the Abrahamic movement, and it's not a Jewish identity, it's not a Muslim identity, it's not a Christian identity, it's common ground. The same way, very differently, but the same way that socialism or liberalism, they don't have borders. There are movements that can include people from all the relevant region under the same school of thought. Over there, we're speaking about secular economical school of thought. That's another issue. But over here, we're speaking about an Abrahamic school of thought that shares, first of all, start the discussion from the perspective of our grandfather Abraham, that wouldn't like its grandchildren to kill each other over misunderstandings or disagreements. And so I think that without relating to the specifics of what those people, movements that I'm not familiar with teach, it's first of all, it's about how do you describe your identity. And if they start from saying we're a Jewish movement, of course, I'm not against it. There's a lot of need in Jewish movement in the Jewish sphere of life. But they cannot be an address to my Muslim friends. They cannot be addressed to my Assyrian Christian friends who also would like to be a part of one a unified front against radical Islam. The Abrahamic movement can suggest this unified identity, not unified, but again, an umbrella identity where we can all stand together and no one is a guest of the other. We are all in the tent of our grandfather Abraham. It's not about Muslims coming to Jewish movement or about Jews come to Muslim movement. It's an Abrahamic movement to begin with, and that's the news over here.
And what is the Abrahamic movement if an outsider will approach us and say, it sounds very nice, it sounds very common sense, everyone recognize itself in it. What is your solution for Gaza, for example? Is it one state? Is it incorporating the Gazans? Or is there a vision in Israel about another way to look at this problem than what the Western world is suggesting?
Yes, I want to divide my answer to two parts. First of all, as an Abrahamic movement, we don't go into details of political solutions. I think it's both unnecessary. I think that it's playing pretend. Those issues, in the end of the day, are being decided by governments, and we can argue all we like about what do we think, but the governments won't listen to us. We should be focused on people to people, on creating the bridges, because what I can see very clearly from my perspective in the Middle East is that the tails are wagging the dogs. So it means that even if you take a look at kingdoms, not democracies, even the king of Saudi Arabia, that is a king, right? He's not going to elections, but even he can't go the distance to normalization if the people are not behind him. If the people are radicalized, if the people are anti-Semitic, if the people are being indoctrinated by Al Jazeera and all the tentacles of radical Islam, and he will try to create normalization, it will jeopardize his regime. And the same goes to any other country. So we should create on the narrative, on the base, on the popular level, between the people, we should create the common ground, the same way that, for example, political Islam doesn't necessarily suggest the specific solutions for every problem in how to run a municipality, okay? But they offer a framework, they offer an ideological framework. And what we're trying to achieve is to create a competing framework, ideological framework that can on the narrative battlefront can combat the radical Islam ideas and can say, you know what, they're offering is internal war, but we're offering diversity and a prospect of peace. But so that was the first part of me answering you. As when it comes to being a movement, I don't think that we should at all address the questions of what will the maps look like, who will control which territory. We're not about that at all. But if you start looking in Abrahamic glasses, okay, and you start applying the principles on the situation on the ground. And over here, I'm speaking not under the banner of the Abrahamic movement, but I do speak under the banner of Tom and my books and what I have to say to the world. So first of all, I think that the first point where everything derailed was the idea that a Palestinian state should be Jews-free. Because that's actually a part of the two-state solution. That's a part of the plan. The part of the European Western plan of the two-state solution says basically that all the Jews, all the settlers are being evacuated to the Israeli state, and the Palestinian state remains 100% Palestinian. I think that if we look from the same moral glasses, people shouldn't be evacuated from their homes because of their religious faith. Full stop. I mean, not if you're a Muslim, not if you're a Jew, not if you're a Christian, whatever, not if you're a Hindu. We should find better systems than evacuating people from their homes because of their religious faith. Again, goes both to the Israelis that are promoting this idea when it comes to the Palestinians, but also goes to the Palestinians and the Westerners that are promoting this idea when it comes to the Israeli settlers in the West Bank. And I think that while we see that most of the political energy in the West and in Israel are going to the question of how to separate, what we want to achieve is the answer of how to live together, because we don't think separation works. But we do see that on specific places, and I'll be specific. I'll speak first of all about Morocco, and I'll speak second of all about Israel itself. Not when it comes to the West Bank or Gaza, but when it comes to actual sovereign Israel itself, where you have 21% of the population Israeli citizens that are Arab Muslims, and coexistence work. We're not fighting each other. We have problems, sure. We have occasional terror attacks as well, sure. But we're not fighting each other. We're interacting with each other. We are part of the same society. We vote to the same Knesset. We lay bed by bed in the hospitals, okay, and it's working. So there are places where people invested the effort in learning how to live together. And in my book, The Abrahamic Revolution, I do this analogy to marriage life, because I think it's a fair analogy. Marriage and relationships should be taught. You don't come with all the knowledge of how to live with your partner on day one. You have to know how to live with him. You have to study it. And Jews and Arabs lived together before. I know that it's not the common take on history, but most of the years, most of the centuries in the Middle East were good centuries between Jews and Muslims. Of course, there were also harsh events, but most of the time there were good cooperation, good prosperity for most of the centuries. Between the 7th and the 12th century, there was even an era in the Middle East that was totally forgotten, that was called actually Israelia. I think it's very interesting to speak about it, because in that era, almost in the entire Middle East, the ruler, the emir, or the head of the clan, was a Muslim, was an Arab, but he always had an advisor, a consultant, a Jew consultant, that gave the last verdict according to Torah. And that's why this era was called Israelia. So when we go back to your question, first of all, I would say I don't believe in separation. I don't believe in those ideas of creating spaces where Jews are not allowed to live because they are Jews, or spaces where Muslims are not allowed to live because they are Muslims, or Christians, or whatever other faith. I don't believe in it. I do believe that there's I'll say something provocative, okay? If you really take a good look about the potential or the infrastructure between Judaism and Islam, from many aspects, it resembles the relationship between the two tribes of Israel, the Kohen and the Levites, and the other 10 tribes. This is an actually valid metaphor. The two tribes had, everything according to the scriptures, had, I would say, more direct connection to God, and they paid the price of having extra obligations, extra mitzvahs, extra things that they're not allowed to do, cemeteries, etc. And Jews, if you will do the same analogy between Jews and Muslims, so it's valid. Jews have more mitzvahs than Muslims. They have more obligations, and Muslim would also acknowledge that if they acknowledge that it's the same Jews from the Quran, that they were chosen by God and they have more direct connection to represent the people in front of God. And actually, many times I think to myself, I even wrote about it once, what would happen in a slightly different reality if instead of walking, and it was an arbitrary decision of people that really didn't knew the deep side of things, what would happen instead of calling the Accords the Abraham Accords, it would have been called the Solomon Accords? Because I don't know how familiar you are with it, but according to Quran, okay, now I'm speaking strictly Quran, King Solomon is, first of all, of course, Banu Israel. He was the king of the entire Middle East by the grace of Allah. He was a Jew that was considered as Muslim because in Quran, Muslim means monotheistic. That's also something that we can relate to. He was fighting on behalf of Allah, which is Hashem, it's the same thing, okay? And he was granted by Allah, the only person, the only living person that according to Quran was granted magical forces. Not even Muhammad was granted magical forces, okay? But King Solomon, according to the Quran, was granted from Allah. That's a unique thing. No other being was granted these forces from Allah in Islam. The magical force to discuss with animals, to control the winds, other traditions that we also know from Judaism. But obviously, if inside the Quran, the only person that Allah rewarded with magical powers was a Jew, a son of Israel, king of Solomon, we're compatible if they can recognize it. And we can recognize them as Noahide. And they are. Basically, they are. Then what's left to fight on? Who lives where? People will live in their houses.
So that was very much deep insights, Tom. I'm a little bit mesmerized and enthusiastic about the broadening of perception of what you are saying. And I became at the end of, I think it's good that we came to end our story this evening, but that we can learn from you and from what you're saying to look with Abrahamic glasses to history and to what is happening now. And that is that are spectacles that are not separate, that not promote separation, but connection and common ground. It feels very grounded, and I think we will discuss this further, because this is a magical approach to a lot of polarization in this world. So thank you very, very much. There's nog one quick question. Jeroen, a very short question and a short answer, Tom.
Yes, it's okay.
Yes, okay, thank you. I was wondering, you were talking about the Israeli kingdom, if I was hearing it correctly, medieval kingdom or another type of state. How can I find information about that?
It's not a kingdom, it's an historical time, basically. It's an era in the Middle East called the era of Israelia. As I said, basically, again, I'm not sure, you know, a lot of this knowledge is history. I didn't make it up, but not always it's accessible in English. Not always these materials come up or in other languages. But I guess that if you will be consistent and try different way to spell the word Israelia, and look for an historical era in the Middle East that was called Israelia, you'll probably be able to read some about it. I will say that an amazing product of this era is something that I think that is missing from this world, is a book that was created in the 13th century by Rabbi Nathaniel Payumi, who was a genius rabbi that lived in Yemen. He lived among the Muslims, and he knew very well Quran and Islam and Hadith, and he was studying with the Muslims, and he knew, of course, he was speaking in Arabic, and he wrote a book, a very unique book, called The Garden of the Brains. It was written originally in Hebrew, in Arabic letters. I think it's a very interesting fact. And this book really bridge all the narratives of Judaism and Islam together in a way that is based on both Quran and Torah. And I think that until today, I didn't heard anyone that could have disputed it. Because I think a large portion of the theological dispute between Judaism and Islam is the Islamic claim, and I'm not saying Muslim because not all Muslims will share this claim, it's an Islamic claim, that the Torah was corrupted. So it was given to Moses, as it says in the Quran, but afterwards, all kind of things happened, and the text that we have of the Torah today is not what given to Moses, and that argument basically is the argument that enable Muslims to detach the chain or the convent from reality. But I think that it became very, very obvious that you cannot detach this chain. And those arguments, once you, I really, I could speak about it hours, and I know that we have to wrap it up. But those arguments are not holding water, and part of the book of the Garden of the Brains, that it explains from the Quran that Allah couldn't allow one of his holy books to be mutilated. He wouldn't allow it. He would fix it somehow. And that's actually something that I sent to many imams across the world. And all of them basically said, this is something that we cannot argue with. So this book is, I think it's part of the assets that were created during the period of Israelia. But today, I think it's not very approachable. Maybe you will be able to find a copy if you're interested.
We are looking forward to the Dutch translation, and maybe we can come in touch for if there is more information and more possibilities to engage.
For sure, and your community is more than welcome to join the Abrahamic movement. If you would like to arrange something like this, we should discuss it, but I think it could be very natural.
Yes, let it be very natural, and we will discuss it. And yeah, it would be nice if there are ways we can, how we can approach this Abrahamic movement for the people who want that or want more information. So many blessings for you, Tom, in your mission and in your work and in your family. May Hashem bless you abundantly.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, and I hope to see you again soon.